Sonja Sutherland show. We are talking today about human trafficking. January is designated as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and just this past Friday was observed National Human Trafficking Awareness Day on January 11th. And so we're here today to talk some about how we can understand the plight of individuals caught in human trafficking. And my guest today is Kevin McNeil, and he is a sex crimes detective, and he speaks across the country and internationally, bringing awareness to sexual abuse and human trafficking. And so we want to shed some light on the underlying and sometimes invisible level of victimization that's inherent in trafficking, and just provide information about how victimization can happen and resources that can provide help, and how you as an individual can be a part of helping to stop the horrors of human trafficking. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you for having me, Sonja.
Absolute pleasure. It's always good to talk with you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to start, I guess, a little bit just to talk about some of the stats and to understand, how prevalent is human trafficking. We know that Atlanta is a major national hub, an international hub for trafficking. Tell us a little bit about the stats.
The stats. People really don't understand the significance and how widespread this is, how much money it generates for the persons who are empowered or abusing these sex trafficking victims. And so a lot of runaways, people who've had abusive pasts, become victims of abuse, sex trafficking more easily. And because we're silent about it and we don't see it, right, because it's one of those things which is hidden in plain sight. And so the statistics is hard to pin down, because until the victims come forward and say that I'm a victim of sex trafficking, we don't know what the true numbers are at this point. And by the time a victim does report, as detectives, one of the things that we understood, by the time a victim comes into the special victims or police department to report a crime, they've been victimized multiple times. So it's not the first time that it has happened to them, and they're afraid to come forward to the police. And so the when people hear stats about it, people find that it's unbelievable that it's happening, but they don't understand that it's happening even more than what they hear about the statistical data. The statistical data is on the low end. It's never on the accurate part. And so,
that's scary. Because when you look at some of the data, it says it's in the millions. And you're saying that's on the low end.
Oh, that's on the low end. That's on the low end, because you have some victims that don't even come forward, that they may get out of the game somehow, some way, or their pimp or their trafficker may get arrested, and that may free them. And sad to say, as a law enforcement officer, you have some people, family members who traffic. I've worked cases where moms traffic their daughters. And so it's one of those things where it's so widespread. Common, I guess.
Let's talk about
people don't look at sex trafficking as a crime. They see it as the victim volunteering, or the victim somehow participating in their own victimization.
Willingly.
And
that's not the case.
It's not. And we live in a culture, we created a culture where the victim is questioned, but the suspect is always given the benefit of the doubt. Right? When the victim comes forward, we ask them multiple questions. They have to speak to police. They have to speak to the courts. They have to speak to lawyers.
They have to spend time in jail.
They have to spend time in jail. And the suspect has the right to remain silent.
Right. And that just compounds the abuse. And we understand that victims of human trafficking struggle with complex trauma, not just from childhood abuse and abuse during victimization, but after, when they're in the system.
That's it.
Compounds the abuse. Right?
They're re-victimized because the system itself that's meant to, I won't say help, because the system that I worked for as law enforcement officer, we were created, or we function as a responsive unit, which means that after it occurred, we waited for the victim to come to us. And by that time, it was too late. So what we were essentially saying, the victims had to be responsible for stopping their own abuse. and until they said something, the abuse continued.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, where pimping was, celebrated.
Like the show.
Yeah.
What's that show?
Hustle and Flow.
Hustle and Flow.
Yeah. And you remember they got a Oscar for that song. It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp.
Every time I heard that song, I thought, what in the world?
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah. And think about the irony of
Yeah.
it. Look who introduced the award, Queen Latifah, a woman who came out as being this, fiery, vibrant woman that was against misogyny and against who you calling her. And now she's introducing the award for It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp.
And so we know
Mm-hmm.
that part of the problem in terms of victims being able to really come forward and really get help, it's a societal.
Oh, definitely. It's a culture.
There's just a culture that surrounds them.
Oh, yeah.
That says, you're not important.
That's right.
You're not as important as.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And why did they ask so? We even ask kids this as long as, why did you take so long? Why didn't you report? Why didn't you scream? And because we don't understand the dynamics of trauma and how victimization happens in the mind first, and then the acts that follow that.
Yeah.
Right. We look at the acts as being voluntary, but once the person's mind is susceptible to this abuse, this manipulation, and when they don't feel like they're worthy, and when we create a culture where even if they say something, they're punished for talking. So we've created this culture of silence where it's not okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so now victims, and I tell people, if you look in the Bible, the Israelites, right, they voiced their pain and their distress, and God responded to their voices. Victims are always behind justice, and those who become the voice alongside the victims help them get justice.
Right, which is what we need to be.
Exactly.
The voice alongside them to help them get justice.
We need to empower them to say, I want to talk now. I want to say something.
Yeah, and the word you use is important because we're talking about power here.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about power, and when we talk about victimization, we're really talking about levels of power that victims don't have, and the power that perpetrators do have, and that we have to be able to stand alongside them to help them come out from that.
Exactly.
So let's talk about then a little bit about what makes victims susceptible.
Okay.
What makes a child susceptible to being caught in the life? What makes a woman and a man susceptible to being trapped and staying in the life, right? We know abuse. We talked about that just briefly.
Yeah.
And so we know that most trafficking victims have histories of childhood abuse in the home, even before they get caught up.
That's true. And a lot of times it's the mindset that I'm not worthy of anything. My worth is tied to my body because that's the only time I've gotten any affection and any type of attention was due to allowing or not allowing somebody to touch my body in an inappropriate manner. So now the mindset is my only worth is my body.
Yeah.
And so now you have a pimp or have somebody that comes along and say, let's make you some money. Or you have guys that would recruit young girls. They pick out their victims very carefully.
Yes.
And so they'll go to a school with a young lady who may not have the best of clothing, the best of life. And peer pressure is hard in school. Kids want to look their best and they're being fun of. So all that the trafficker needs to do is get a victim that's unsure about herself, low self-esteem, and say, I'm going to buy this purse. I just want to make sure you look good in school. I want to make sure you're taken care of. And then turn the tables on them and make them a victim.
It's very much a psychological manipulation.
Oh, yeah. It's
that
mental
occurs.
health.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a mental. People forget that aspect of it. And so a lot of people say, well, they look at the victims on TV coming forward and telling their story, and they always question why now, right? And they don't understand how much it took to get to that level.
That's right.
The mental anguish,
That's right.
the struggling, the going back and forth. By the time you see a victim come forward and talk, they have gone through so much anguish. Oh yeah,
they've been through hell and
mentally
back.
they've had to fight with themselves.
Yeah,
because they're asking the same questions you're asking them.
Yes,
like,
and so that own shame. That shame that they experience, and that goes back to even before they were victimized in that way.
Yeah.
If we think about the potential, and this is not the case for every young person. In some cases, though, where you have a young person coming out of an abusive home, and you still ask the question, well, still, why are they so susceptible? Why couldn't they talk to their parents about this or that or the other thing? But if you're dealing with a young person coming out of abuse,
Yes.
more than likely there's family conflict in the home.
Oh, yeah.
And there's motivation to not be in that situation.
Yeah.
Where can I find a different situation for myself
Exactly.
than the chaos or the conflict or the abuse, physical, sexual, that's going on at home?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So that breeds the susceptibility
Oh, definitely.
to someone coming along and saying, like you said,
Yeah.
I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
I'll be your daddy.
Exactly.
You don't have a daddy, don't
Yeah.
worry. I'll go buy you something to eat.
Exactly.
And I'll take you out and I'll talk with you. And that becomes the confusing dynamic to a mind that is already
That's
manipulated
it. Yeah.
and already traumatized.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
I can't see the forest for the trees. I can't really see the manipulation. All I can see is somebody doing something that nobody else is doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that because I saw a quote on Instagram that was so powerful. It said when a child is abused about a parent or a loved one, they don't grow up to hate the loved one or the parent, they grow up to hate themselves.
Yes.
And so there's another component to that, the celebratory fact that in music, where it is celebrated that men can have power over women and use them for sexual gratification and all these other things. And so a lot of times when you get the victims into our office, their mindset is, I'm helping him become great, just like the Hustle and Flow movie. I'm helping him become great. I'm helping him to meet his dreams.
Yeah.
I'm part of his dreams.
Yeah.
And if I have to do this for him because he loves me, then I'm willing to do it. And so,
And
there's
that's
so
a
many-
mantra in their
Oh,
head.
yeah.
He loves me.
Definitely.
He loves me.
Because love to them looks like abuse.
That's right.
Right? So to them, this is love. He giving me something. Because people forget by our very nature we're social beings. We crave
And
acceptance.
relational beings.
Relational,
Yes,
yeah. And so
yes.
if we don't get, even if it's a fake connection,
It's a
It's a
connection.
connection,
Yeah.
right? That's why social media is so powerful and so influencing, because it gives you a sense of being connected to the world.
And you know, we when we have done past shows, what we talk about on the show is the family being that first place of
Oh,
belonging,
yeah.
right?
That's-
People need to belong,
That's powerful, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if they don't find belonging in the place where they're really meant to find safe belonging, they go look for it.
Gangs.
Yes.
And then we demonize, or we criticize and judge their craving for that connection. So they'll join gangs, they'll join clubs, and it's to get that affection, to get at least somebody I can go to a group that cares.
That cares about me.
Even if it's your mind is wrong, but in my mind it satisfies a need to be
That's right,
accepted,
an
you know?
internal need.
Yeah.
That's a natural need. That's
It's a natural
inherent
need, right.
in every human being.
That's almost like death.
Yes.
Not being, and you hear these stories about prisoners going into solitary confinement. They say they hate it. And they ask them why. They was like, there's no one to talk to. Like I'm stuck with my own thoughts on mine with no one to share it with.
Right.
Right. And then I come from a culture where sharing your personal pain and being a black male and talking about sharing pain with other people. So you holding this pain inside, so it causes this mental anguish.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll go to the gym and work out, but we won't go to a therapist and talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
what I'm holding inside.
Yeah.
Because as a victim myself, right, as a black man, you know, that's that double whammy. You're a man, right? You're black. You should have fought. How did you? And so you deal with all of these, and so you're looking for something. For me, it was sports. Right? I hid in social group. I didn't know it at the time, but subconsciously, the brain was so. I tell people your brain's smarter than you. My brain subconsciously sought groups out, and I just so happened to be the lucky one who saw a group, a positive group like football, military, church, right, police department, and so I hid, but I wanted that connection with groups, even if it was a false connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so these victims are wanting connection.
Definitely.
And they find false connection.
That's it.
And then the struggle in their mind, as you talked about, because even as they have that connection,
Yeah.
and they understand it to be, in some ways, a false connection, it is still the connection.
It still is.
And at the same time, you know, as I've done research over the years, one of the things that I realize is that another part of the conflict for them is sometimes they know they're being victimized and they can't reconcile,
Yeah.
I'm being victimized, but he loves me.
Yeah.
I feel connected. What's wrong with me?
Exactly.
Right?
It comes to hate and judge
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
It's to this is more me than it is them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there have been cases where I've tried to help victims, but they didn't realize they were even victims.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I tell people this, you know, I knew domestic violence was wrong growing up because I didn't like it,
Mm-hmm.
staying in the house with domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I became a police officer
Mm-hmm.
that I understood that it was actually not normal.
Uh-huh.
So, you know,
Uh-huh.
so it was like,
Mm-hmm.
everybody do this, right? We were taught, like, you don't let a woman talk back or you put a woman. And so so when I saw my mom going through it, you know, my stepfather, it was like, okay, this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
But when I became a police officer, wait, you mean to tell me this is this is not supposed to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And so, same thing with abuse and sex trafficking, right? We think victims, okay, she went with him, or they didn't leave.
Yeah.
Like, there's a door.
Right.
You have access to a phone.
Mm-hmm.
You could have called the police to call for help, but they're not thinking that. They're trapped in their mind.
That's
And
right.
when you're trapped in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
there is no way out.
There is no way out. And trauma, trauma impacts the brain
Oh,
in
definitely.
such a way that it really impairs
Oh, yeah.
your ability to think clearly.
Oh,
Your
yes.
judgment is impaired.
Definitely.
And so there needs to be an understanding for folks who are on the outside watching some of these situations and
Yes.
having questions like, well, why didn't they this, or why didn't
Yes.
they that, or I
Mhm.
don't understand this, or I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Understand all of the physiological pieces of
Yeah.
it
Uh-huh.
in terms of the impact of trauma on the brain
Exactly.
that impacts functioning and judgment.
Definitely.
Understand the psychological pieces
Mhm.
of it, where manipulation and power are involved, and
Yeah.
shame, and all of those types of things
Yeah.
combine to create this traumatic situation
Yeah.
that negates the ability or impairs the ability of
Mhm.
victims.
And that's important. That's very important, because first thing people do when they hear a victim story, they put themselves in the victim's shoes.
Yeah.
And you can't do that.
You can't.
Because once you judge, you can't have empathy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what we do, we think if that were me, I
Mhm.
would have.
Mhm.
And that's why we keep asking
we
these
don't know.
questions.
Right.
We're asking it from our point of view,
Mhm.
and we're not understanding what the victim has gone through
Right.
mentally, psychologically,
Yeah.
physically,
Yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah.
Because there are two battles there, and the hardest battle is within yourself.
Mhm.
The questions you have,
Mhm.
like you said, why did I participate? Am I not worthy that no one comes looking for me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I hope somebody notices. I'm 14 and I'm sitting in a restaurant with a grown man and I'm dressed inappropriately.
And people will see it
Oh yeah.
and will walk by it
Turn the other.
and just kind of look and not want to get involved.
They remain
What
silent.
what is that?
It's people's feel they don't want to believe that it's happening.
That is happening.
And they don't want to know we live in a society and a culture where we sacrifice our children.
Yeah.
And we're willing to allow things to happen to them, and as long as it doesn't happen to
Impact me.
But what we don't understand is that this is affecting our culture.
Yeah.
This is affecting, and I love what Martin Luther King said, injustice happens anywhere, it happens everywhere. And it's true, so true when it comes to abuse and afflicting the minds of young people who have been sexually molested and been human trafficked, because these young people grow up to be an adult,
Mhm.
right? And so that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we come back from the break, we'll talk some more about this.
Okay.
Because there are more susceptibility factors that are
Definitely.
involved just coming from family of origin and
Definitely.
other areas. So we'll talk some more about that when we come back to the
Yes.
Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. I'm here with Kevin McNeil, and we're talking today about victims of abuse and human trafficking, and how to understand their situations, how to understand their backgrounds, some of the reasons why they are susceptible, and why they end up in human trafficking, and how we can think about helping them. So we ended the last segment just talking a little bit about the link between childhood abuse in the home and the psychological impact, and how that makes girls and boys susceptible to being pulled into the life and
Yes.
human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Socioeconomic factors, poverty,
Oh, yes.
can also be
Oh, yes.
a susceptibility factor.
yes.
Parental incarceration
Oh, yes.
can also be a
Mhm.
susceptibility factor.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about some of that.
Well, the economic piece is a lot of these young kids are lured in by promises of gifts and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Or, like I said, these guys' methodology, they'll send use a one girl to send her to school with all this high expensive stuff, and that causes other kids to ask questions, where you getting product bags from?
Mhm.
Like, and then that way they introduce, well, I got a friend. And so the economic piece has a lot to do with the image as well,
Sure.
right? It's because if I don't feel good about myself,
Mhm.
then I can buy an image, or I
Mhm.
can buy love or
Mhm.
acceptance by having money or enough money to purchase things that make me
Yes.
look like I'm acceptable.
Yes.
I love myself.
And you know, when you point to that,
Mhm.
you know, I can hear the dialogue for some people that would say, well, why don't they just work for money to be able to get what they need, right?
Mhm.
And part of it is understanding that in certain socioeconomic strata, there is a very fatalistic outlook
Oh
on
yeah.
life.
Oh yeah.
And so there is not the belief, there is not the hope that I'm going to be able to graduate from high school,
Exactly.
go to college,
Exactly.
get this kind of job. There's not that hope because
no.
there's nothing like that surrounding them. They
No.
don't see those images
They don't.
in people that look like them.
Yeah.
And so there's a very fatalistic outlook.
Yeah.
And so that increases the susceptibility
It does.
to being able to have those kinds of things in the ways that you're talking
Exactly.
about.
And on top of that, you have social media, you have the music industry pushing young kids
Yes.
who have dropped out of school, who see and push money in that hustle lifestyle.
Yes.
And so you see that it's being celebrated to look a certain way, to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cool to go to school, but it's cool to go out here and make money, stacks and racks and money. So money becomes the motivating factor of a person who says, if I had what they had, if I had more money, I'd be more likable, more acceptable. So it plays into, you have this whole mentality that I'm not good enough, not worthy enough. Then you have a culture, society that's pushing images
That's right.
that says this is what being acceptable looks like.
That's right.
You don't have to go to school. You don't have to. And so the social economic factor is you playing on the mindset of the images, like I can buy or I can purchase acceptance and love, and I can get to the point where I can assist this person for coming up to be who they, and if I assist them, then I can be part of that
That's right.
success circle.
That's right.
So yeah, it's a dynamic that most people don't understand, and so it's very difficult to infiltrate that type of mindset.
Yeah.
Particularly when you have a culture that's promoting it,
Yes.
and kids are looking at it, and on social media, you turn people are promoting it, and so it's very difficult to combat that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have situations where families are in actuality pimping out their
Oh
children.
yes, that's
And you know, the first time I heard that, I
Yeah.
couldn't really even wrap my mind.
yeah, that's and a lot of times, you know, you have drug habits, persons who, and it goes back to understanding that family dynamic, that children are not property, that they're human beings, and so you have parents who feel like, okay, you're my child, I can do what I want with you,
Yeah.
and if I have a need that I need to, and it goes back to, you know, we're destroying our children's future so we can live in the present, and so it happens so often, so frequently. People can't believe it when they hear it
Yeah.
happen. Even police officers, when they hear it, they're like, "What the,"
Yeah.
you know. And so this whole thing about, you know, family dynamics, about people dating and bringing people into their home without vetting them or without understanding that this dynamic that you just created, you have daughters, you have children in the home,
That's right.
and you bring a person in the home that you don't know much about, but the desire is that they have a family.
Yeah.
People don't understand that the pull for that, you know, the draw and
Yes.
the passion to
Yes.
want to be in a family union,
Yes.
and that plays a lot of part in the human trafficking dynamic, because when you get a human trafficking victim, she's not the only victim. There's
Yeah.
normally a group of girls, a
Yes.
group of boys
Yes.
that they feel like they're part
Becomes
of,
their
their
family.
of. Yeah, and so they create this makeshift family to accomplish what the pimp wants them to accomplish or the trafficker wants them to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so at least they have each other. And so to leave the trafficking is like leaving a family. So law enforcement don't understand that. You know, you're trying to help her, but you're not asking that person or him or her about the others that are involved.
Right. Right.
Is there something we can do to help your
Right.
friends?
Right.
Because they see it as family.
Mhm.
And that's what the public and a lot of people don't understand, the
Yeah.
strong social dynamic
Yeah.
and the social implications behind human trafficking.
Mhm.
And so it's a money business.
Mhm.
It's a business that demeans and devalues. And even when I make an arrest, that victim has to live with that trauma for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes victims go back into the game
Yeah.
because that's all they understand.
It's a psychological. Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And then they're judged by the public, and that's even more painful. I think what we're seeing now in the media, particularly with this R. Kelly thing, is that victims. The only difference between yesteryear when I talked about growing up in Memphis pimping was look at that as a thing that you hear young guys say, I'm a pimp,
Or it's a
But,
status
yeah, it's a
thing.
status symbol.
Mhm.
So now the victims are talking, and that's what's empowering this. That's why you see more people getting in trouble, because when the victim speaks, right, the suspect has to answer to what the victim says and had to answer these questions. Why would they say that?
Yeah.
And so when we empower victims to talk by creating a culture that says it's okay to talk about this, we're not going to judge you. Then we empower them to come forward, and then you're going to start seeing more people come out and get in trouble. I mean, you're seeing it now.
Yeah. And so when the regular person on the street says, "Well, this is such a huge problem. What can I do?"
Yeah.
This is the mindset
That's
that
the
needs
mindset.
to begin to
Exactly.
be developed in just the regular person on the street that
Yeah.
says, I'm going to move away from a judging mindset.
Exactly.
And I'm going to begin to ask better questions.
Empathic.
And empower.
Yeah.
And how can I be more empathetic?
Yeah.
How can I see
Mm-hmm.
and really see
Yeah.
and not look away?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how can I always tell people being heard leads to being healed.
Yeah.
Because until I'm heard, until I have a voice to be heard, not to give me advice or to tell me what I shouldn't be doing, but because behavior, a lot of things that as a detective that I would investigate would be children's behavior.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I found in the schools, they would be judged by their behavior.
Yeah.
Kids showing up late or they sleeping in class, but why are they sleeping late? What happened at home last night that they couldn't sleep? They're showing up late. What's happening at the home? And when you get to these questions and you ask these kids, they're amazed that you're willing to be
That's right.
interested
Yeah.
in what happens outside of the classroom.
That's right. Why are your
Yeah.
grades slipping?
Exactly.
What's happening outside
Yeah.
while your grades are slipping in
so
school?
it goes back to the whole mental health thing. If I'm not mentally healthy, the part of the brain that remembers and welcomes new information is shut down because it's so worried about survival.
Yeah.
And it's worried about needs.
Yeah.
And so I can't concentrate on algebra when I know when I get out of here, I may not have no food in the house or my mom's boyfriend may be touching me at night. So I stay up at night because when I go to sleep, he comes in the room.
Or I run away.
Oh man, that's a
I
big
run
one.
away.
That is a big one.
And then I get caught
Yeah, and go to jail.
and go to jail.
And get punished for it.
And get punished
And
for
get
it.
returned back to this very same home that I ran away from without any questions being asked why I ran
That's
away.
right. And then I run away again.
Yeah.
And I get picked up by a trafficker.
And what happens is, if I'm running from law enforcement and I'm running from traffickers,
Yep.
so I'd rather run to the trafficker than law enforcement because I'm being put in jail. And right, and so at least the trafficker is providing the opportunities
Yeah.
in their minds
Yeah.
to have something.
Yeah.
Right, law
Yeah.
enforcement is taking away my freedom and judging me. I tell police officers all the time. I used to work these cases and I pull up on the scene as a detective and the officer got the victim in the back of a police car. Like, why should take her out of the police car in handcuffs?
In handcuffs.
Right? And question and not only that, got it in the back of the car in front of all these people that's staring at her.
Yeah.
So now you've just shamed this
Yeah.
victim.
Yeah.
And so now you want her to talk and tell you everything that she knows about this particular pimp, knowing that you're going to let her back out, and that creates a danger.
And then
Yeah.
she'll be retaliated against.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be retaliated against, and then not just by the pimp, but by the community.
Yeah.
Because this whole stop snitching thing or don't snitch. You hear this in music. You hear this, and what we don't understand about that silent mentality, that do not snitch, is that we are promoting crime. We're promoting this behavior because the only person that benefits from silence is the actual perpetrator.
Yeah.
Right? The victims don't benefit from silence.
Absolutely.
Again, going back to most victims have to be responsible for stopping their own abuse because until they say something, the abuse continues because we're turning a blind eye or we're not listening. So
Yeah.
part of my passion is helping people listen.
Yeah.
Like, instead of judging behavior, why is that person acting that way?
Yeah.
Why drugs? Why alcohol? Instead of putting titles on, they're a crackhead, they're alcoholic. Why?
Yeah.
What are they going through?
Yes.
And so it
What
allows
happened
me
before that?
exactly.
Yeah.
It allows me to have empathy rather than judge. I always tell people it's hard to love what you judge.
Mhm.
So if you're judging yourself, it's
Mhm.
hard to love yourself.
Yeah.
And most victims self-judge. They judge. I'm not worthy of anything.
Mhm.
If I were, my mom and dad would have loved me,
Mhm.
or they would have came looking for me.
That's right. Or they would have believed me.
They would have believed me. That's a
Mhm.
big one. That's a
Mhm.
big one.
Mhm.
The culture now, like even with the R. Kelly thing, there are people coming against the victims.
Yeah.
You know, and there are people.
And I hate to say this.
Yeah.
And I'm saddened to say it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not surprised.
Oh, I'm not either.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not either. They're asking, and then there are people that are supporting the suspect.
Yeah.
And what that does, not just for the victim in question, but some victim that's right now
Yes.
being molested.
Yes.
And want to come
Yes.
forward and tell.
And won't do
What
it.
what the public is not understanding is that you're keeping that victim silent, because they're watching how you're treating
Oh,
victims
yes.
on TV and
Oh,
in the
yes.
public, and you have this little girl, this little boy somewhere right now as we speak, because statistics says that every 10 seconds a child is abused or molested here in America. And so there's a child right now watching the R. Kelly thing, watching these people ask these questions and on these radio shows, and they're saying, I'm not coming forward.
That just breaks my heart.
Yeah, yeah.
It just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And it makes, and I know there are people out there who feel the same way. It makes us feel powerless
It
to a
does.
degree.
Yeah.
Because those are things that we
Mhm.
believe we don't necessarily have control of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, part of what I have wrestled with and come to
Mhm.
is that I don't necessarily have to control all of that. I'm in my space.
Exactly.
There's something I can do within my realm
Yes.
that can be, even if it has a small impact.
Oh, yes.
If everybody does that,
Oh, it'll big
and
impact.
everybody has a small impact, you
Yeah.
create a bigger
You
impact.
create a bigger impact.
Right?
Yeah, and you create greater awareness.
Yeah.
And when greater awareness comes, they're willing to be educated about these things. That's the big component. They're willing to be educated. Like right now, there's a big thing coming up in Atlanta, the Super Bowl. There are going to be pimps and sex traffickers flooding this area because, sadly to say, the reason the businesses thrive is because they're buyers.
Right.
There are people who don't care that these girls are being, or these boys are being
Yeah.
trafficked.
Yeah.
And they're just wanting their own sexual gratification from
Mhm.
this. They don't understand that you're creating a culture or an environment where you're allowing human beings
Yeah.
to be bought as property.
Yeah.
And so the Super Bowl is, you're going to see this influx. That's why you see all this promotion about human trafficking, stop sex
Mhm.
trafficking.
Mhm.
You know, I think that's great and that's good. But then what?
Yeah.
When the Super Bowl leaves, does the education stop?
Right.
Does the promotion?
It does stop.
Yeah, it does.
It does
and
stop.
And we both know that's what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
It's going to stop. It's the education. And I think one of the things that I'm saddened about is that we mostly focus on the act and helping the victim stop getting abused, which is great, but we don't provide the services afterwards. Like the therapy. Like, it saddens me that I can go in any neighborhood, urban neighborhood, I can see a gym. I can see a gym, and I see no therapy officers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we focus on making the body look good, but the mind is still.
And that points to, when folks say, well, what can we do to help? And we'll talk more about that, but it's not just therapy. For
Mhm.
those young ladies, there are so many areas of
Oh,
help that are
yes.
needed,
Oh yes.
in addition to the
Oh, yes.
mental health,
Oh yes.
right? They need education.
Yes,
They need a trade.
they do.
They need to figure out, how do I earn money
Mhm.
in a way that's not what I have always done
Yes.
in terms of earning
Yes.
money.
And that needs to be an environment. There's organizations that I work with that are building farms with horses and just take them away that
Take
that
them away.
whole environment
Yeah.
all together,
Yeah.
like and help them to like certain meditation practices and breathing practices and things like that. that helps them.
Housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Housing. And,
Safe housing.
Yeah. Because
Safe housing.
it's hard to change the brain if you're going to keep it in the same environment in which
Yes.
wired it.
Yes.
Because the brain is wired based on experiences and
Mhm.
environment. So if I stay in that environment, you've seen that before. You get somebody out of jail, they come back to the same neighborhood, they back in jail.
Yeah.
But you didn't take them out of the environment and the culture. If you have to rewire their mindset to think differently, and the good with, but again, going back to what you're saying, we have to create communities like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And our communities have to transform to
Yes.
spaces and places where they can come
Yes.
back to and actually begin to have a different mindset.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so anyone can help in multiple ways.
Oh, yes.
There's so many ways you can,
Oh, yeah.
even if you can't physically be a part of something, you can donate to
Oh, yes.
organizations that
Oh,
are
yeah.
doing the work.
Oh, yes.
Right? That are creating safe, long-term housing.
Oh.
That are creating spaces away from the environment.
Exactly.
That are available
Exactly.
for women and children to go to.
Oh, yeah.
And to get them out of it.
Yeah, and I see that. I drive around Atlanta, drive around the city. I see these abandoned houses.
Yeah.
And I said, man, wouldn't it be great if a church purchased that house, flipped it, and made it a safe house, right? And so we can't just look for things for profit right now. What would it profit us if we help this youth
Yes,
and
that's
we
right.
help victims? Well, how better would our future be?
That's right.
And so when I see things like that, my idea is, like you said, you don't have to have the money to do it yourself, but if you can push the idea,
That's right.
you know, get somebody, okay, for every house you flip, to 5 houses, flip one for a family.
That's right.
You
If
know.
you're a doctor,
Yeah.
offer some services. If
That's
you're a
it.
nurse,
Yeah.
just offer some services. If
Exactly.
you're in your church, flip the house.
Yep.
Say, I'm going to go
Yeah.
twice a month and offer medical
Yeah.
services to
Exactly.
them because they need it.
That's it.
They need it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a listener.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go and listen. I don't want to offer any advice.
That's
I
right.
just want to listen.
That's right.
I want to hear your pain.
That's right.
I want to hear your concerns, your fears, and I'm not going to even say anything. I'm going to give you a space to release your desires and your anger and your anxiousness. And so, like you said,
I'll go do a yoga class.
that's it. That's it. I'll bring to you,
Yeah.
right, instead of help. Because what happens most of the time, you know, I do this work a lot, and parents bring their children to these centers, and
Yeah.
we tell them, come to us.
Yeah.
And the parents are like, no, I got to go to work, right? And so there's more pressing needs.
Yeah.
And so there's no transportation. Say, hey, you know, let us buy a bus for this organization, and we're going to go bring your kids
That's
after
right.
school programs.
That's right.
And things of that nature.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll talk some more when we come back after the break. This is Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
Kevin McNeil. And Kevin, I wanted you to just tell everybody a little bit more about just the work that you do across the country.
Yes.
Talk about some of the books that you have written.
Yes.
And some of the advocacy work that you have done.
Yes, I'm the CEO of the Cynthoia Project. It's a company that was created to educate the world on the effects of abuse. Right now, I currently travel around the country. I talk to child advocacy centers. I talk to law enforcement officers, lawyers, and judges. I talk to the professionals, but my passion was to get the information that we were discussing in these conferences and private meetings and taking this information out into the public to educate the public. And it's simplified enough to make people interested enough to say, wow, this is why I see this in my community, because the effects of trauma on the brain, it affects behavior, it affects decision making. I always tell people there's a direct correlation between silence and violence. Right? When we don't talk about what ails us, we act it out. And so the Cynthoia Project was created for that reason, and I created that because being a law enforcement officer for 20 years, a special victim detective for 12 years, I started seeing patterns in the community. Victims were coming into the office reporting abuse, and I started seeing it was transgenerational. Like I would see a child come in, and then years later the child will be incarcerated.
Yeah.
And it'd be a victim on one end, and another end they become a suspect. And I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then I would find out family histories from families. I would do more than just question the victim about what happened to them. I asked the family, tell me about your history. And I found that there was abuse, there was this lineage of abuse that was passed down from generation to generation. And when I started educating them about the effects of abuse on the brain, families became more interested. You know, people had this concept that people don't want to be educated about such a topic, but people who were affected by it became extremely. And I had one woman tell me while I was in church one time, she stood up, she said, you just explained my whole life in 30 minutes. And she said, now I understand why I made every bad decision that I made in my life. I thought it was me, but it wasn't. It was what happened to me. And that just blew me away.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I said, we get all this information in books and we hold these conferences about abuse and the effects of trauma, but nobody's going out into the community to talk about those who it affect the most.
Yeah.
And so I started writing about it. Like, how do you have this conversation with a child about abuse? Most people say, I don't want to talk to that about my child, right? If it happens, but I want to have a conversation. But the problem is, the child doesn't know that what's happening is wrong, or they could tell somebody.
Right.
So I created a book called the Talk About Child Abuse book. Talk is an acronym to teach our little kids. And so it goes through the body parts, and it has a police officer, cheerleader, and a reporter as the main characters in the book. And the police officers tells them what is bad, good touches. The reporter tells them who they can tell if it happens, and the cheerleader gives them a cheer about their body so they can learn the body parts. And so I wrote that book, but I also wrote a book for parents who had the experience of going to an investigation, child abuse investigation. And what I saw in my own experience as an investigator, we would take children from their parents, take them in the back room, interview them, and give the children back to their parents and tell them, we'll call you later.
Oh, wow.
And so the parents become anxious, and when some of these parents and families stop cooperating with the investigation, as law enforcement officers, we thought that was an unfit parent, or that parent was being uncooperative. Well, we didn't put ourselves in their shoes. You're talking to my child, and you're not telling me the process.
Right.
You're introducing us to all these different people as part of you. Introduced me to a child advocate, introduced me to a forensic interviewer, you're introducing me to a district attorney, but you're not telling me what are their roles in dealing with my child. So I wrote a book called Understanding Child Abuse Investigations for Mommies and Daddies. So they can they understand what every part of the investigation is from A to B. That helped parents become more comfortable in being a part of the investigative process. Because some parents, your child gets molested, you want the guy in jail right then.
Yeah.
Right? But if you don't understand there's a process to investigating, to getting statements and things like that, you become upset with the process. And so I found there was a lot of that happening in law enforcement wasn't really explaining. They didn't think it was a need to explain and educate the parents on what was happening in the investigative process. So I wrote a book about that as well. And I wrote 2 other books. I wrote a motivational book to help people with everyday life. I talk about, and to help victims, take it one step at a time, small things, and how small things make a difference. Pocket full of stones, small challenges, small nuggets to help you with giant challenges.
Yes, this book right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Right
So
here.
so I wrote that book to help people along the way, to help them understand this responsibility. There's a responsibility element to being blessed and being successful. And a lot of the times it's in the little things, like our time, our thoughts, our processes, thought process. And I wrote another book, Kevin the Invisible Little Boy. That's a fiction book that kind of chronicles my story, but it talks about it from a psychologist's point of view of how Kevin goes through the invisible forest. He runs into anger, shame, guilt, and depression, and he wants to be invisible, but he befriends these characters so he can become invisible. Then he meets Hope. He meets Hope in the forest, and Hope tells him that you got to come out of this forest. You can follow me out of the forest, but you have to leave your friends behind.
Yeah.
So Kevin has to choose hope over pain, anger, shame, and guilt. And so after that, he learns he has a purpose in life.
That's a hard thing.
Yeah.
To choose hope.
Oh yeah.
Over all of those.
It is, because
you would think people would think that well, why not choose hope?
Yeah. In the book, I deal with that because
Yeah.
he's become very close friends with pain, guilt, and shame. They've helped him become comfortable with who he is in the world. And so hope is trying to draw him out of that safe, secure place that he's always known into an unknown world, scary world. So hope is scary to someone who's never seen it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and here's the thing with hope. The hope is that people will not reject me.
Exactly.
The hope is that I'll be loved. The
Yes.
hope is that I'll be accepted.
Yes.
And the fear is that, but if I'm not,
Yeah.
that's
the fear.
scarier.
And I always tell
Then-
people,
Yeah.
the brain loves what it knows, it fears what it
Yeah.
doesn't. So if I know abuse, at least I know how to cope with it.
Yeah.
I don't know what love feels like, and what happens when I finally let myself be loved, become vulnerable. And that's the whole idea. People don't understand that when people are molested and sex trafficked, they're at their lowest and they're vulnerable. And for them, they equate vulnerability with being unsafe.
Yeah.
Well, you and I both know to be intimate, you have to be vulnerable. But how do you trust after being abused?
Yeah.
And so you look at the world as a very dangerous place, and people as very dangerous elements to your world. So you become very secluded, and you build a wall. It looks like you're alive. It looks like you're interactive, but you're really just surviving and trying to make do with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a very difficult life.
Yeah.
Victims live very, very difficult lives,
Mm-hmm.
and most people don't understand that.
And most people don't see it.
They don't.
It could be in front of them, but sometimes it's so subtle
Yeah.
and it's so masked
Yeah.
that if you're not paying attention, if
Yeah.
you're not willing to ask questions,
Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and we cover these things.
Yeah.
Like the media's covering this Jamie Cross thing, and her pictures everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
This young girl got to go back to school.
Yeah.
Right. We never think beyond her life as a 13-year-old, and it's like she's 13, and what has she's gone through, and if I can't deal with that in a private way with people I know are concerned and loving me because who I am, and then you're dealing with a different aspect. Our parents were murdered.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that really gets me when it comes to police departments, and I teach them, when a victim walks in that office, the office itself is not conducive to a victim being welcome.
Yeah.
You put them in the same room as you do suspects.
Mm-hmm.
You bring them into an office where suspects are sitting in the waiting room next to them, and it's like there's no soft music playing, there's no waterfall, there's nothing to indicate that I'm glad you're here.
That this is a safe space.
This is a safe space,
Yeah.
and not only this is a safe place to report what happened to you, we want to get you the help that you need.
Yeah.
That's not communicated.
Yeah.
Right? We focus so much on the suspect. We use the victim. I tell you this, police department hate when I tell them this. We use our victim to get to the suspect, because
Right.
the suspect is the focus, not the
Right,
victim.
not the victim.
And so
And in the meantime, the victim slips through the cracks
that's it.
and is lost.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then years later, if the victims participate in behavior, alcoholism, drug, we judge it. Not knowing, and I tell people, everybody has a story. If you really want to practice empathy, every person you meet, just ask them what's their story. And it allows you to have empathy and to be willing to listen to what happened to that person that caused the behavior that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Instead of judging it, you go, wow, I don't understand how you coping. I don't understand how you living, right? And so, police. My job now, I resigned from being a police officer because I was essentially told I couldn't do both. That I was being paid to put people in jail, not to heal people. So
Really?
yeah. So
That's a little mind blowing.
It is. It's.
I mean, yes,
Yeah.
I suppose so,
Yeah.
but still.
That's why I
know.
resigned. I gave up a career. Didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't have any money. I didn't know. I just knew that I couldn't continue to put people behind bars when my job was to keep them from, not just the physical prisons, but those spiritual prisons that they were in, those mental prisons.
Yeah.
And so, jail was a result. Some of the people I would take into jail was a result. You sit here and listen to them, and I was even listening to some people who were committing crimes, and they would tell me their stories. And I'm like, wow, didn't know that, and so it was amazing how it's sitting in interview rooms by listening to people. Listen to a young kid, 19, who committed 6 rapes, and when
19.
19. And the sergeant is going back and forth with him, drilling him. What do you do? And the guy just, I don't want to talk to you. I don't wanna talk. And then out of the blue, I asked him, have you ever been told you've been loved by a man? And he looks at me, he falls back in his seat. And the sergeant is telling me to be quiet. And before we know, his bottom lip is trembling, his eyes are getting watery. And I look at him, I said, when was the last time a man embraced you? He just broke down. And he started talking about how his mom always told me he was going to be like his father, and how he always was degraded by his mom, how he never felt good enough. And I just asked him, is that why you did that to those women? He just said, yeah. That one question allowed him to be human.
Yeah.
I want you to see me as a human being, not as a suspect.
And and that is difficult for the public at large.
It is.
To see.
It is.
Because what's visible is the crime, the behavior.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand that while the questions, have you ever been, or what is your story, are not meant to negate the behavior
no.
and excuse the behavior, but it is meant to understand the behavior because intervention is needed.
Then we can prevent it.
And jail is not the intervention. It is just a holding place.
That's all it is.
That's all it is.
It's a holding place, and it's a holding and molding place.
Yes.
Because now I'm stuck. I'm stuck with these thoughts. I'm stuck with what I did. There's no outlet to talk about what I did. And if I get out, I don't have an opportunity to do it again because I never received the help that caused me to do it in the first place.
That's right.
And so, and not only that, and I know people don't like to hear me give suspects an opportunity to explain their stories, but it helps me learn how to prevent it from happening again.
Right.
Right. So maybe I could have cut him off. I could see another kid coming up in the same direction, and then I can explain to a group of mothers how what you say to your kids is very important.
Matters.
Then
Yeah.
you can start talking about the idea of corporal punishment, how science now is discovering that it destroys the wiring of the brain, and it destroys the parts of the brain, creates cortisol, which makes the hippocampus not operate properly, which it incorporates new memories and learning abilities. And so you're causing the very thing that you're saying you're trying to prevent by doing what you're doing in the home.
Yeah.
And how culture.
Well, I was beaten by my parents.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Nothing happened to me.
It happened to me. And then I had a woman tell me that, and she was sitting in my police precinct about to go to jail for a felon because she beat her daughter half to death. And she said, "It happened to me." I turned out fine. I said, "Ma'am, you're in the police
You're in the
precinct,
police station. Yeah.
about to go to jail."
Yeah.
And I always tell people when they respond to me that way, I said, "Did you really? Are you living your best life, or are you coping with life?" And then they look at me like, "Wow, I never thought about that." You say you turned out fine. You think just because you got a job and you functioning, it's fine. But that's not really.
That's not it.
It's not
That's
it.
not
So
it.
when
Not
people
holistically. We're talking about, are you well? We're talking about wellness.
Yes.
Right? And how all of this impacts overall wellness.
Man.
Mental, emotional,
Yeah.
physical, all of it.
Yeah, especially with your relationships.
Yeah.
I tell people relationships are so important.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't have a relationship with someone where you can be honest. I had to learn this the hard way after a divorce and after a broken relationship with a fiance, that I was feeling certain things, but I didn't know how to express them.
Yeah.
So I was shut down.
Yeah.
And the other person felt that. You know, even though I didn't express it, they felt the wall. And so it was like, okay, you just here, but
Yeah.
you're not here.
Yeah.
You know, the first time a woman told me that, I was like, what that mean? You know, what you mean I'm not here? It just so happened she was a therapist I was dating, and I was like, okay, that was kind of weird, but now I understand what she meant by it, right?
Yeah.
That the fear of being vulnerable, and because when I was vulnerable, I was taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So when you see sex human trafficking victims, it's not enough just to stop the behavior or stop the act. That's good. We need to do that. But we also need to talk about how do we create best circumstances and situations where these people can get reconnected back to themselves and be remembered, right, back to themselves and remember who they are so they can enter into culture and society and they don't become what happened to them.
Yeah.
But they can tell their story and be empowered by telling their story.
And sometimes it's even not even remembering who they were or who they are, but figuring out for the first time
who they are.
Who they are.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And that's something like I'm watching it, going back to this story that's in the news now currently. The talk is about getting her back in school, and it's like, I know she needs to return to normalcy, but if we're pushing, act like it didn't happen.
That's right.
You know.
That's right, and that's and it happened.
Yeah.
And it was hugely, traumatically impactful.
Oh yeah, and not only that, they talk about returning her to school. You also need to educate the kids that are at her school, because now you need to help them understand what this young lady may have gone through.
And therein lies how difficult and how huge this whole ball of wax and intricate it really is.
Oh yeah.
And hence the need for so many people, for everybody, for the community, for society at large, for each individual to find a space where they can do something. Something, even if it's in your home, where things are stable. You talk to your child about all of these types of things, right? It's not just because it's not happening in your home, it hasn't happened in your family. It doesn't mean that you're not a part of a society that needs to create awareness.
That's it.
And create people who want to advocate, even in the smallest ways, to help those who are victims.
You're right.
Right? And it's as simple as that. You don't necessarily have to go out and do a huge thing.
No.
Start in your home.
That's it.
You hear this conversation that we're having. If you're listening, you're hearing this conversation, just start by going home.
That's it.
I listened to this radio show today.
Yeah.
Here's what they were talking about. Here's what I thought about what they said. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever come across this in your school? Have you ever come across this at work? And just have the conversation.
Exactly.
That's the beginning of awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing I tell people. I use the example in some of my presentations with a plant. Right, the earth is like a garden. Right, whatever you tend to, right, grows. And so I always tell parents a great gift to get a child, if you don't want to give them a pet, is a plant, because it teaches them to care, it teaches them to nurture, it teaches them to be connected and to close to something to help that thing grow, and understand the responsibility of all of us to help things around us grow,
Mm-hmm.
and that we can do that in different ways. Like you said, you know, you volunteer to church, you know, go to your pastor and say, hey, I've been hearing a lot about sex trafficking in the news. Why don't we talk about that?
Yeah.
Um,
And if you don't know how to talk about it,
yeah.
reach out.
Bring somebody in.
Bring
Go
somebody
to the
in.
internet,
Yeah.
and say we're going to do this, and you'll be amazed. I tell you, I speak at church or something. You'll be amazed, and I can look. Being a victim myself and being law enforcement, I can tell you. I was speaking at one church one time. The guy was shaking so bad. He didn't even know he was shaking.
Yeah.
He was just shaking, and when I got done, I wanted to reach out and talk to him. He bolted and left.
Bolted.
And it's like, wow.
And it was right there.
It was right there.
It was right there.
He was just shaking, and he was one of the, you know, the person sitting up front, and I just knew, you know, how many other people in this room talk about statistical data.
Mm-hmm.
How many other people in this room have had something similar happen to them?
And you better believe it's a lot.
Oh yeah, it's a
lot.
large amount.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Mhm.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about this when we come back. We're going to go to a break and just sit tight and join us again on the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. Welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We've been talking today with Kevin McNeil and talking about human trafficking and just creating greater understanding and awareness of the difficulty of the situation, just societally, and how we as individuals can potentially impact such a huge situation in our society. So I wanted to ask you, you have another book coming up
Yes.
in the spring. Tell us about that.
I have two actually. I have a fiction book called Godchild, and it deals with this particular subject matter, human sex trafficking. It's based. The story is based out of Atlanta. You know, a young lady moves from Memphis to Atlanta to escape her abusive relationship in Memphis, and she encounters a situation here in Atlanta where she didn't know it was going on, and so she gets dragged into this whole situation of sex trafficking. Unbeknownst to her, she doesn't know what she's saying, but when she gets deeply involved,
Yeah.
she has to actually make a decision. What we're talking about today, she has to make a decision: do I get involved or do I turn a blind eye to it? So she decides to get involved, and it changes her life for the better, and also the person's life she attempts to help. So that book, Godchild, and I also have a book, a nonfiction book called Breaking the Deadly Silence. I'm not talking about abuse is killing us, and I use research to talk about the effects of trauma on the brain, also on culture and society, and how the sicknesses and the ailments that we're seeing in our bodies is a result of creating a culture that abuse thrives. Like
Yeah.
our bodies are responding to this event, our brains are responding to this abusive culture we're in, and we created it through music, we created it through mindsets, we created it through sometimes into our theaters, and how we have normalized abuse to the point where it's normal to be a victim of abuse, particularly when it talks about how we talk about our women, the birth of the mothers of our children. And so some of these record companies that are promoting violence and misogynist lyrics, and so I talk about that, and I put the science to the actual data and the results that we're seeing in our culture, so people can see that the reason God gave humans a voice so that we can be heard and be taught. We can talk. You know, there's a scripture that I use that says, "Confess your concerns one you to another, so that you may be healed." And how having a voice is power. When you take a voice away from somebody, you just taking away their power.
Yeah.
You just rob them of their greatest gift, which is their ability to be heard. And so that's what that book is about.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure I use the science and the data to back up what I was traveling the country and talking about, so people can see that there's a correlation to heart disease, cancer, and all these diseases that we're
Yes.
seeing. And I often remind people that Jesus was educated and a healer. And one of the ways that Jesus healed people was through education, helping them understand this is why this is happening to you. This is why, you know, you have these things happen among you. And so I wanted to really tie in the religious, spiritual, the scientific evidence to show people that the world we live in is like a garden. You know, I love the scripture that in the beginning it says, "Let them have dominion." You know, in the Western mindset, we think of that as power, but in reality, it means let them be responsible for the outcome of. So what we're seeing in our culture, I want this book to show we're responsible.
Be responsible, yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we're seeing abuse, then we are responsible. If that's human sex trafficking going on, then you and I are responsible for it. It's not their problem.
That's
it's
right.
not another person's problem. That you and I, we're sitting here, like you said, we're doing something about it. We're actually contributing to a result that we can be proud of.
Yeah.
And so if we're not doing anything, then we're responsible for it. We're enabling. And that's the thing, going back to the R. Kelly thing, people knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They just remained silent on it because they enabled the behavior. And so the same thing with us. If we're not finding ways to educate ourselves and to play a part, no matter how small we may see it, because there's nothing small about this matter, then we may not be contributing to it directly,
Yeah.
but we're enabling it to occur in
Yeah.
our society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what we miss as individuals is that the smallest thing that we see that we tend to ignore contributes. So, for
Oh,
example,
yes.
I think about the Super Bowl coming up,
Yeah.
and the commercials and even the halftime shows where you'll see. Okay, I don't remember which Super Bowl this was,
Yeah.
but somebody was dancing. It was
Yeah.
a girl. I don't know if it was Beyonce or whomever.
Uh-huh.
And no clothes.
Yeah.
And this is the thing.
Yeah.
Right? This is a
Yeah.
great show.
Yeah.
That is, in my mind, a level of victimization of
Oh,
women.
yes, definitely,
right?
definitely.
But we ignore that.
Yeah.
We think that's okay and that's normal.
Yeah.
But if we decide not to turn a blind eye to the fact that we promote women dancing half naked as entertainment
And use them to sell
acceptable,
products.
and use them to sell products, and not have those conversations with children
Yeah.
about, here's what's wrong with this picture, why you shouldn't stand for this.
Exactly.
Now imagine the ripple effect of that conversation
yeah.
with your children in their formative years.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Because they're playing up on the emotions of the brain and the dopamine effect. Now, if I'm hungry, I associate a beautiful woman with selling hot wings. Or if I want a beer, to have a good time, it's associated because the brain loves to pair and associate things. And so it could take shortcuts. So, and I tell people all the time, it's amazing how subtle it is and how we have accepted it as a norm.
Yeah.
We've accepted it as a normal. And the thing is, what we don't understand, the more we do it, the more we become accustomed to it, and it becomes part of our lives.
That's right.
It becomes second nature
That's
to us.
right.
And so a lot of times people don't understand like for instance, my biggest push, I pushed this for a while. Most sex trafficking, well, I would say almost 90% of sex trafficking happen in hotels.
Yeah.
But we don't punish the hotels for allowing it. See, I used to go back and tell city council, so if it's law enforcement, I'll make a bust at your hotel sex trafficking, but we're going to fine your butt.
Yeah.
And so that prompts them and promotes them to get educated about what sex trafficking looks like. You see a guy coming in the hotel room with a young girl, you automatically need to be asking questions.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the hotels are making money off of
Yeah.
it. Right? So you're not holding people accountable for their actions. Just like you can arrest the buyers, but the buyers are being given a space to commit the act, which is the hotel. So there are very few. When I speak at conferences, I always ask, is there someone from the hotel industry here? No one raises their hand. Why don't we make them accountable for what they know is happening in the hotels? But they turn a blind eye. Like the Super Bowl is coming out, I hate to say it, but it's a bunch of hotels going to benefit from human sex trafficking.
And and I think people who attend the Super Bowl and will probably say, I've never been to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But those who attend will probably say, I don't see that.
Yeah.
I've been there. I don't see. Part of what we have to understand is, we are long past the day when you're seeing just cars driving by and women leaning over into cars.
Oh yeah.
It is internet driven.
Yeah.
It is technology is a huge people can go online
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
gain access
Oh, yeah.
and pay for it and
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole 9 yards. And so it's become even more invisible in that sense
Oh, yes.
and blown up so much, and it allows folks to kind of say, oh, that's not really that big a deal.
Yeah.
It's not like Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Where
yeah. And that's the thing I tell people, I teach law enforcement this as well, is that you have to learn to listen for abuse rather than look for it. Because if you're looking for it, you're not going to see it because it's not going to jump out at
That's
you. But
right.
if you listen for it, there'll be those subtleties. Like you'll see a young girl, like I had a woman say, a young girl sitting at the McDonald's with this older guy,
Yeah.
and the way he was interacting with her, he knew she knew that wasn't his daughter. And then she looked at how she was dressed.
dressed.
And then she saw a car pull up in the parking lot and the girl leave and the dad not leave with her. She was like, well, what did I just witness? She just witnessed a sexual transaction.
Yeah.
But she didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And she called the police department and told us what she's seen. I said, man, thank you for calling and reporting this.
Yeah.
You know, she said, I didn't know what else to do. She said, in the past, I wouldn't have called because I would have thought it was none of my business.
Right.
But because she was listening and not just looking, she
Yeah.
was able to say something not right in my spirit about what I
That
just,
is great.
just witnessed.
That is great. And those are the types of things that we need to be willing to do.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, before I really started getting into the research, but I was aware.
Gotcha.
I was sitting at a Starbucks and I witnessed something that in my mind I thought, this is trafficking.
Yeah.
But I was afraid at that point. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What should I do? Should I say anything?
Yeah.
Right? Even I didn't know what to
Yeah.
do. And I was aware at that
Yeah.
point in time.
Yeah.
I remember calling a friend of mine
Uh-huh.
later on, and she was a coworker of mine also in the field and did a lot of work
Yeah.
with trafficking victims. And I called her and I said, I think I just saw what I saw and I didn't do anything. What's wrong with me? And she said, listen, that is not uncommon.
It's not.
It's not uncommon.
It's not.
Right?
Yeah.
And we had to talk through it because
Yeah.
I had such guilt
Yeah.
over the fact that I didn't do anything
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
Right? And it's hard to know,
Yeah.
what should I do? But we have to be willing
Yeah.
to. And I think part of it is in your mind, what you said before. You said, we just don't want to believe
We just don't want to believe
that
it.
there is,
Yeah.
that this could really be
And- yeah.
happening
And
and
it's-
it be right in front of us.
And it's also part of the system because what would have happened if you would have called the police? What the police would have told you, no, well, the victim has to come and complain about
Yeah.
that. We
Wow.
can't, so the system itself is not set up to say,
Yeah.
okay, ma'am, come into the office, we're going to get as much information extract, we're going to go to the McDonald's, look at the videotape or the Starbucks,
Yeah.
look at the videotape, see what we can find. Most than likely, you're going to hear, well, ma'am, if the victim doesn't come forth, you're not related to the victim at all, then you can't report a crime. And so I hear that a lot. I even hear that in my personal experience, right? You try to call somewhere and say, I need my mom to get help, elderly abuse, whatever, and they say, well, your mom has to report it. You can't. And victims don't report their own abuse, right? Until it's too
Wow.
late sometimes. So this whole system has to change.
Yeah.
How we respond to make people like yourself feel comfortable,
Yeah.
because that's why you felt uncomfortable. That in your mind, you probably didn't think it. You probably were subconsciously thinking, I don't want to report something that's not happening, or what if I report it and it's not happening?
And I'm
What if
wrong.
I'm wrong?
Yeah.
So, and I always tell people, police department work 24/7, 365, right? So reporting a crime is not the same as getting someone in trouble for a crime, right? But if you report it, you're doing your due diligence.
Yeah.
Right? So the person who committed the crime got themselves in trouble, not you. You didn't get them in trouble. But that's one of the things, this commonality between abusers and human sex trafficking victims. They always tell you, you're going to get in trouble if you report this. And the very first thing we do as police officers, we go get the victim and bring her to a police precinct.
And they're in trouble.
And they're in trouble.
They're in trouble.
Or the perception is I'm in trouble. And so this plays back to the mindset. The pimp has been working on them and telling them, look, you call the police, all they're going to do is lock you up. All they're going to do is belittle you.
And they're right.
And that's what happens. We put them in the back of a police car while everybody watching them.
Yeah.
We and here's the thing, there was one case I remember specifically, and I was working with this detective, and they couldn't find a bed for the girl because she was homeless. She from out of state, and because they couldn't find a bed, they said, we're going to take her to juvenile. And I was like, wow. And I said, no, don't do that. I said, have you asked her if she wants something to eat? And the detective himself said, why would I ask her that? Wow. And I was like, and so then when the girl finally said what she wanted to eat, the detective didn't agree with her food choice. And I was like, wait a minute. This young girl wants this. Just because you don't like it don't mean she don't like it.
Right.
Because I tell people, the first thing you want to do with a victim is give them their power back. Right? And that is subtle as allowing them to sit where they want to sit. Allow them to share their story when they want to share their story, not on your time. But
and
that's my push.
that is just so key though,
Yeah.
because I think it flies in the face of understanding the level of victimization that they really experience.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and some of the stats talk about just the percentages of assaults. I think some folks think about the idea that, well, if they're involved in the life, then they are willingly doing it,
Yeah.
right? But the reality is, number one, they're not willing.
They're not.
But number two, most often they're assaulted as part of what's going on there.
Oh yeah.
Not only by the Johns,
Oh yeah.
but they're assaulted by their pimps. They're held at gunpoint.
Yeah, and then they're re-victimized by law enforcement because as law enforcement officer, I saw it time and time. Even I did it subconsciously until I started learning. Like,
Yeah.
wow, because when you're not educated about the effects of victims, when victims change their stories, you're thinking they're lying. But it's part of the fragmentation of the mind where
Yes.
they'll remember in stages.
That's right.
And so once you educate law enforcement, understand that sitting in front of a victim is very confrontational, right? So I learned to sit beside victims, giving them a choice where to sit. And so it was these subtle things that were re-traumatizing these victims that law enforcement weren't privy to the information.
Yeah. There's so much to know and understand.
Yeah.
So much to know and understand.
It is.
And so it really is so important for us to go after the education.
Definitely.
To understand, right?
Definitely.
So what I want to talk about when we come back from the break is really more information on how people can potentially identify potential victims before they become victims.
Yeah.
Because prevention is a huge part of what we want to be involved in as well.
Oh, definitely.
All right, we'll be right back on the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
Hopefully going to help just the regular person on the street be able to just become more aware. This hopefully will help teachers be able to become more aware of what may be in front of them in terms of what to look for. So what should we look for in terms of children at risk?
Definitely you should look for the outward appearances. The kids who are wearing extremely expensive items. Some of these kids are used as recruitment tools to get other kids interested in the trade. Sometimes it's hard to spot as far as with the physical eye, but if you just listen to look at the behavior, they're running away. That's a big one. You got somebody that's constantly running away from home, or you have someone who's very distant, like they're afraid to connect, or they're being isolated from their family or isolated from their friends. All of a sudden, you see someone who's used to be outgoing and very engaging, now have become sort of secluded and very private and secretive. So that can be, and one of the things that sex traffickers do, they want to get you out of your environment. Because they know the possibility of you saying something or somebody noticing something different about you would draw attention to you. So again, runaways, the way they dress, watch interaction between adults. And if you have kids, you know how you interact with your kids. If your spirit is telling you something, because we're listening spirits, follow your gut instinct. We call it the gut instinct, but your spirit can hear a cry for help, even when the person is not crying out loud.
Saying it,
So, and that's, as a victim, is what they're hoping, that they can be heard without being expressing what's happening. And so I think we attune ourselves to listen and just ask questions. If a question pops up, why is that guy touching that girl that way? Or why is she dressed that way? As a father, I know I wouldn't let my daughter dress that way. Then those are the questions that don't ignore them, and pick up the phone and call the police. Right? And so it's nothing wrong with reporting it. Put the responsibility on the agency that's supposed to help stop this type of stuff. That's what they get paid for. That's what they're there for. As a law enforcement officer, I was there sitting at my desk sometimes. The phone wouldn't ring. So, but there are things happening that report it. If you're suspicious about it, you know how interaction goes. That's your spirit telling you something's not right with that interaction. You see a young kid hanging around the hotel, without a parent, or or seem to be by themselves a lot. That's something to look for. You see a kid riding, sometimes you can look in the car and you can tell, how kids are very stoic. Children are children. No facial expressions. You can see the kids very tense. seem to be walking behind the person instead of hugged up with the dad, and being very sociable with their parent. Seem to be very distant, and they're not walking together. She's walking behind him, or she doesn't order. Most of you take your kids to McDonald's. What do you want, sweetie? You see the kids, let me get this, and the kid just sitting there waiting at the table while he orders. That's kind of uncommon.
Yeah.
So it's things like that.
Simple things.
Yeah, it's small things that you probably wouldn't pay attention to, but are big things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are big things. Yeah.
And I imagine too that folks need to be aware that we're not necessarily looking for, we are, but we're not only looking for teenagers.
Oh yeah.
We could be looking for a 10-year-old.
Oh yeah.
A 9-year-old.
Oh yes.
It's
younger
not,
and younger.
yes.
Yeah. It's those interactions, and a lot of times when you start dealing with those younger people, there's somebody close in the family that may be involved with the process as well, like a relative or a parent. Like I said, I've worked cases where parents sold their own children into sex trafficking. And so, family members have to be aware. You have other family members that you're not in communication with. If you don't get along with them, at least get along with the kids. Find out what's happening with them. So,
and if there's conflict, if you're aware of conflict between parents and
definitely
children,
get social services involved.
Yeah.
If that child is running away, and because eventually, these is what these guys, they look for runaways. They thrive on them because now they've offered them security and a place to stay and something to eat. And so, what better way than some kid running around in a new city that don't know what to do?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then if you have young people who, and this is so hard now because it's so common, spend a lot of time on the computer.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of recruitment via technology.
Oh yes.
It's not just face-to-face recruitment or physical recruitment.
Yeah.
There's recruitment online as well. And so if there's a kid that's spending a lot of time online, and yes, I hear it now, that's every kid.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is. and they have games now that portals that you can message between games like this game, Fourth Right, whatever it is. It's a very popular game, and a lot of molesters are using that game to interact with children because they know most of the children are playing that game. And so video games become a portal because now you have games that have made access to communicating directly with people without anyone else knowing about it. So that's part of the culture we're talking about, creating access for pedophiles and molesters to have access to our children. And without educating our children on the dangers of this, we're setting them up to fail.
And so that means parents being educated on all of it. And so just, there is always this conversation, between generations. Oh, my kid just knows so much more about technology than I do. I can't keep up with it. There's so much, and it's true, technology changes so much.
Exactly.
But as parents, we really have to become much more savvy.
We have to.
In understanding what is available online.
Exactly.
And getting in there.
Oh, yeah.
And part of that is, if we are engaged with our children, what game are you playing online? Let's play it together.
Exactly.
Let me learn it with you. Right?
And the apps that are available that are meant for secrecy. You have like Snapchat, what's the other one? It's a bunch of apps that are meant that are created that kids use to, or suspects use to communicate secretly and privately, that even law enforcement have trouble getting their hands on when it comes to investigating these type of crimes. So there's this predatory mindset that companies are making access, and so again putting pressures on them, like there need to be some parameters or some gauges of the parents. If I buy my kid this game, is there anything in safety features on the game that can prevent my kid from being in, or if it does, I can get the text that they get when they get text in the game. So, we got the whole media companies responsible for, and these companies responsible for, oh, you're going to produce this, I'm not going to buy it unless it has these certain safety features. And so then you send a strong message to those who produce these type of avenues for molesters and pedophiles that you're not going to tolerate it, and that they're not going to be able to make money by accessing. Like one of the greatest things that's happened in this last couple of years was the shutdown of Backpage.com. These guys it was legalized pimping. And so they hid it on the advertisements of products, but the main section that was making all that money was the human trafficking part. And so for the government to shut that down. It took a lot to shut it down. They talked about rights of, the rights to have, free speech and all of that, and, free enterprise. But, we have to continuously make our, and that's what happened in that instance. People held people responsible. We're not going to buy into these products if you're going to allow this to happen. So I think that's a big push that we need to also work on. Holding companies responsible for allowing these products to be available to pedophiles.
Yeah. And so parents can have power by being aware and asking questions about products and making demands.
Oh, yes.
And being wise consumers before we give our children access to whatever it is that they just want.
And you'll actually make companies started using that as a part of their advertising. Our products come with safety features that prevent the possibility of molesters and pedophiles to contact your child directly. And so what you'll create an effect where other companies will follow suit. Okay, this seems to be the hot item now. It seems to be the buying, promote people to buy my product is the safety features pertaining to children's access to the internet. I'm gonna buy it as well. And so companies that are not, participating will get on board or they lose money. So you have to force their hand. Like I said, victims control justice, and people who are willing to support and be a voice for victims make justice happen. So when we're silent, injustice happens. So if we're just going to let the media companies make money, these gaming companies make money without any responsibility whatsoever, they're going to continue to do it.
And lest I want to go back to the socioeconomic factor, lest those individuals that are middle to upper income believe that, well, it's the responsibility of parents from lower socioeconomic statuses to do that, since it's mostly their kids that seem to be victimized. Let's kind of pull back from that, because that is not the case. While it is the case that is often how it happens, socioeconomic status is not always a barrier.
Oh no.
Oh no.
It's not really that big of a barrier, because when sex trafficking pimps go after young people, they're not looking at socioeconomic status. They're just looking at availability. And so if your child has access to the internet, you can be wealthy and
modeling job.
Oh yeah. Oh, big one.
Modeling job.
Big one.
Yes.
I'm working on organizations now, sports organizations, where they put me on the radar because I wasn't even thinking about them as being on the radar. Gymnastics and events where young kids thrive and their bodies become a part of their performance. And so I was approached by the Sports Athletic Association, and I was like, wow, I never thought about that. They tell me about guys sitting in the stands who don't have no kids and just be coming to these events. Like, well, they contact the girls directly. And so it's stuff like that, that we have to put on our radar and say, how can we create this all-encompassing mindset that we're going to protect our children at all costs, no matter what they're involved in. And we're going to make sure predators know that we're watching for our children.
That's right.
We're watching out for them.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot. I want to talk a little bit about Cynthoia Brown.
Oh, yes.
I was reading through that case, and I was so grieved by the media coverage of it. I'm glad she's being released.
Yeah, I am too.
That's not the issue, but I still have concerns, and it allowed me to really know that we haven't really come as far as we think we've come when it comes to societal understanding of what's going on. I was reading an article, and the way that they spoke about the case, they talked about, being glad that she's rehabilitated herself and that she is now able to make better choices.
Wow. And
she had proven herself in jail, and so that's why she was being released early.
Oh, wow.
And just all those kinds of things. And it really, where was the victim?
Yeah.
It really felt as though they had really placed responsibility for what happened to her
exactly
squarely at her feet,
with
no just understanding of what created that situation that she ended up being placed in, and had to defend herself. And it just, I was just grieved.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I said, we put the responsibility on victims to stop their own abuse. And this is one of those classic cases where she had to use lethal force in order to stop her abuser. And, my question for all the people that were marching, I'm glad people marched and they protested and they got got attention, drew attention to her. But where were they when it was happening? Like, and even now, would they still support her even when she's out? Because this young lady, just because her body is free doesn't mean her mind is.
Yeah.
And so, what is really going on? Does she needs some type of normalcy? She needs some type of space and place where she can grow and rehabilitate. And so, are we willing to pour money into that aspect of it? And not only that, to help her recuperate, but help others that are like her that could see the support she's getting, that they can say, wow, there are people out there that are willing to help me.
Yeah.
So I want to come out of this too. I don't want to get to the level or the point where I have to use drastic measures that she did and then get punished for it. Because she did time in jail. What was that like?
15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
of a 51-year sentence.
Wow. And just think about that. The system punished her for standing up for herself and protecting herself because the system wouldn't. And that's the thing, I tell people all the time, one of the hardest things for me as a detective was to sit on that stand and get drilled by a defense attorney about how I didn't do enough to convince the jury that his client was guilty. Like,
really?
Talking or the evidence that I had wasn't sufficient enough, or a defense attorney argued that a 13-year-old girl wanted it. It wasn't rape, it was statutory rape because she voluntarily had sex, and try to make that argument and try to get his client off. And I understand defense attorneys doing their job, that's what they get paid to do, but it's hard to sit on that stand knowing what you know and knowing that there are people sitting in that jury box who probably would buy into some of the concepts and ideas that the defense attorney is throwing out there because they're not educated on why victims respond the way they do.
Yeah.
And so it's very sad to see that, yes, this young lady's going to be released, but what type of quality of life will she have? And are we willing to continue that support?
That's right.
Because a lot of people disappear after, we did our job. But did you really? She did 15 years. She still, you got to think about the traumatic event that happened.
That's right.
She had to take another life to protect her life.
Right.
That's trauma within itself.
That's right.
And what happened prior to that happening that she had to turn to such drastic measures to do that.
That's trauma
so,
as well.
Yeah, so you're dealing with this traumatic effect of a young girl being free from prison, but she's still in prison. And it's like, the only way that she can be totally free is through community.
Right.
And we have to create spaces and places with
safe spaces and places,
like her, where they can go and grow.
Yeah.
And not just be existing and surviving.
Yeah.
Just throw her back into society like nothing ever happened. And I think, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
She's going to get lost in the shuffle, just like the girls in Detroit.
Yeah.
We don't hear about them anymore.
Right.
Or what's happening in their lives.
Right.
And so every year we're dealing with something, and we're pretending that it's a shock to us. Whether it's a college coach doing something, or as an actor, or as a celebrity, and we acting shocked each time it happens. So these are symptoms. We're not stopping long enough to ask, wait a minute.
Yeah. Something needs to change.
We need
something,
to change.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big piece.
Yeah.
Like with her, I feel so, I'm with you, I feel so bad for her. And what's to come if the right practices and the right services are not in place.
Yeah. All right. Well, when we come back, we'll wrap up the show, and I want to talk a little bit more about how folks can find you.
Okay.
If they would like to have a speaker come and just, reiterate a few of the main points that we want people to come away with at the end of the show. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
And just give you a few more resources that you can utilize. If you are a family member or survivor or a victim concerned about how commercial sexual exploitation affects young girls and women, there are a number of resources that are available. And if you're in need of immediate assistance, you can contact not only the police, but any of the national hotlines, and someone can be available. So the National Trafficking Hotline, you can certainly look that up, 888-373-7888. The National Runaway Safe Line, many of our victims are in fact runaways, and so 1-800-RUNAWAY is certainly something that you can tap into. If you are wanting to try and sponsor some type of educational program, Kevin, can you tell folks how to reach you?
Yes.
And, more about the 12 Project and everything that will allow them to be able to connect with you?
Yes, they can go to www.the12project.com. 12 is spelled out. And if they want to book me for any event, I come in and speak, do everything from churches to schools, do organizations as well, sport athletic organizations as well as corporate organizations, to teach them about the effects of abuse and the effects of an abusive culture.
Yeah.
And so if they want to contact me, they can contact me that way.
Okay.
Or they can email me at kmcneil@the12project.com.
K. McNeil.
Yes.
Spell that out just so they
It's
make sure.
KMCNEIL at THETWELVEPROJECT.com.
Okay,
Yeah.
K. McNeil at the 12 Project.
.com. Yes.
.com.
If they
Yeah.
can email me and definitely set up a date, and I can come in and tell me what they want and tell me what they hope to accomplish with our time together, I'd be more than happy to come in and
Yeah.
educate them on
Yeah.
that.
And just reiterate the books that you have.
Yes.
Tell us the names again, the titles of your
The
books.
Talk About Abuse book.
The Talk About Abuse book.
To teach our little kids about abuse book is to help parents have that conversation before it happens, to help the kids understand the nature and anatomy of their body and what's good and bad. Then I have the parents who have gone through that process or currently going through the process of going through a criminal investigation involving abuse, the Understanding Child Abuse Investigation for parents, mothers and daddies. And then I have Kevin the Little Boy, and that is mostly a book for helping you understand what victims go through as they experience some type of trauma. And then I have Pocket Full of Stones, using small nuggets to help you with giant challenge, which is motivational in nature, based upon David and Goliath, how God uses small things to make big changes in our lives. And then I have a nonfiction book coming out this year called Breaking the Deadly Silence, and I also have a fiction book coming out this year called Oh God Child. And so that would deal with sex trafficking and the subject of sex trafficking.
Okay, all right, good. And what we can also do is make sure that we have that list of books
Okay.
up on our website, www.helpformyfamily.com.
Okay.
So we'll put that up as well. So
Great.
if you forget any of this, if you're listening and you didn't write all of it down, we will also have Kevin's contact information on www.helpformyfamily.com as well. And so you'll be able to find it there as well.
Yes.
And so I'm also interested in just talking a little bit about churches.
Okay.
And, historically, churches have not engaged
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah.
And there's such a need. Church
Oh,
is
yes.
just a primary pillar in the community, in
Yeah.
every community.
Oh yes.
Right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so there's such a role that churches can play in being able to galvanize
Yes.
individuals to be aware and be a part of the solution.
Oh, that's
What
so-
has been the barrier why churches don't seem to do it?
Yeah.
And what have you seen in the past few years that maybe says that maybe some churches are beginning to come alongside?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers is the belief system that this can't happen to a Christian, or we can pray this away,
Yeah.
or if it's happening, we can pray about it and it'll cease happening. I had a pastor actually, so-called counsel a young girl. Their family brought them into an office and sent the victim back home with the perpetrator, and thought prayer was going to solve it. I've had instances where I've listened to jail calls, tracked jail calls from the suspect, where they were calling their pastors and how the pastor would belittle the victims over the phone.
Wow.
And taking up for the suspect. So education is another big piece, but I think church's biggest obstacle is their belief system that this isn't happening, or if it is happening, it's only happening to bad people,
Yeah.
or people who are sinners, or people who are outside of the church. It's happening to people sitting right in your pews,
Right.
So I've seen some churches. I've gone to Cincinnati, traveled as far as Cincinnati, speak with major churches who actually host conferences specifically to this topic.
Okay.
And they're willing to invite people in, and you'll be amazed at the outcome. Some churches are surprised at how many people show up at these events, and they pack them out, and they want more information. And, I spoke at one church event. One lady came to me and said she was angry, and I asked her about what. She said that I've been in church all my life, and this is the first time this topic has been brought up.
Wow.
And so she was angry. She was visibly angry, and she wanted to know why. Same question you're asking now. Why is such a barrier for churches to talk about something that's affecting all of their members? And so I think it's part of the belief system. And I think another thing is churches don't think that it can happen, or if it happens, they don't understand the implications of it happening. And I use scripture to show people. One of the harshest scripture in the Bible, when Jesus said, if anyone doesn't think to these little children, it would be better for them to tie a millstone around their neck and throw them to the sea. I was like, that's pretty harsh, And one of the first songs we learned in church, I know I did as a kid, is that Jesus loves the children, right? So why doesn't the church do more to protect them?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things you have to bring to their attention, and they think they can pray about it, and it stop, but it's a big issue.
Yeah.
It's a big issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a big issue, and it's a hard issue to deal with.
Yes. Nobody wants to talk about it, and we think in not talking about it, it'll go away. Or it won't appear as bad. And so, the thing I also find with churches is that they don't see the need to talk about it until it happens. They're almost like law enforcement. We'll wait until it happens, then we'll bring you in to talk about it. Well, it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
So. And a lot of times, for some reason, people believe you talk about things, the more likely they'll happen.
And it's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
The more you talk about it,
The
the more awareness, and the less likely that there will be victimization.
Exactly.
And that's applicable across multiple realms, not just abuse.
Oh yeah.
That's applicable all over the place. Yeah.
And I really shock churches when I say predators love two places: the internet and church.
Oh.
And one of the reasons why is accountability, lack of accountability, right? So churches invite people in and say, you want to be a youth minister? Okay. I've plenty of cases where, the accusations have come up, and the first thing I do is Google the person, and it's right there.
Church.
Like they have a record of the molesters, the child pedophiles, and the churches never bothered to even have a system in place to protect the children. So there are churches now try to teach. They have a kids ministry where you can just walk in and grab a kid and walk away with them. There's no accountability where you have to, but some churches actually have tracking bands where you have to actually sew a band, but most churches don't.
Larger churches might.
Larger churches might have it, more organized churches, but there are churches I've worked with who you can just come in, just grab a child and go, and some children will go with you. If you know the parent's name says such told me to come get you, they'll go with them. And so churches have no record system to prove that the child was there at the time. They don't do background checks on their ministers, to make sure that there's no record of it, or if the person is transferred from one church to another. And I've had churches do this, and one of my, I do show sometimes people ask me about what's my greatest regret as a detective, and I name some of my cases, and one of those cases involving a bishop, where the church helped him escape when I was looking for him.
Really?
They actually moved him to another state. So helping churches understand that this problem is big, and we can't do it without them.
Yeah.
Like, we really can't do it now, because the particular community gives so much credence and attention to the church as an institution, that for them to say something about this and address it would be a big deal. So I think some people are waiting for the church to say something before they can even think it to be a serious problem.
And part of it too, I believe that churches, so let me say this carefully.
Yeah.
Leadership can be abusive.
Yeah.
And so some of the pushback in churches could be, if we actually come out on this, who will be revealed and exposed.
And a lot of things I said about that, and I said this a couple of years ago, I said God is about to reveal abusers, and that you can't hide anymore. So, and since I've said that, a lot of people have been exposed, and I think it's going to continue to happen. I think this is a season where God is going to give the victims, because victims are speaking. God responds to victims' voices, and when people get alongside victims and decide that they're going to stand up and be a voice for victims, I think God acts even more. And I think that's what you see in the book of Exodus, when God said, "I've heard their voice, I've heard their crown coming down to intervene." I think that's what you're seeing now. I think if churches choose not to get involved, then God will. And so I think that's what's going to happen. So whether you want to talk about it or not, God's going to come down, because the victims are now speaking out.
There's so much more that we could say
and
talk about around this topic, but I'm glad that we were able to talk about at least what we could cover. And my admonition to folks who are listening is that we all know somebody that has been abused.
Definitely.
It doesn't matter where we are in life. It doesn't matter our socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter what we do occupationally. Everybody knows at least one person who's been abused. And if we can and would come alongside and listen and say, let me hear your story. How can I help you? and find resources to help, even in the smallest way.
Yeah.
You know, find your sweet spot for helping. It's not going to be the same as mine. It's not going to be the same as Johnny's down the street. It doesn't have to be huge. It's not going to be the same as Kevin's. but find it
Yeah.
and become an advocate in the
Yes.
smallest way.
Exactly.
And you can be a part of helping to stem the horrors of abuse and the horrors of human trafficking. And so I hope that this show was really helpful in terms of helping your awareness. And please reach out to me at drsonyasutherland.com. Let me know that you were listening to the show. Reach out to Kevin at KMcNeil at the12project.com.
Yes.
Let him know that you were listening. Ask how you can help. And either one of us will be happy to talk with you and help you to really begin to find where you can step in. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We'll see you next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Coming up at noon is the Leadership Blend, so stay tuned. Have a wonderful week.